So welcome everyone. And before I show my slides, I just want to take a quick poll because today's webinar is titled The Power of TikTok and Influencer Marketing. And so just as a quick way of background, I have been a professor at Halt International Business School for upwards of about 5 years. Prior to that, I actually was with the Simmons University School of Management in Boston, and that's where I got my PhD about a decade ago. And prior to that, I actually have about 25 years of professional experience, primarily working in the healthcare industry, and primarily in an entrepreneurial capacity as the COO and CEO of 3 different startups in the healthcare space. So lots of experience, both practical as well as academic, which is, I think, pretty common for the professors that you'll find at Halt. So I would like to throw out a question, which is, what is your favorite social media platform? So before we show our slides and jump in, I'd love for you to put into the chat, what's your favorite social media platform? Instagram, Reddit. Okay, what else? What's your favorite social media platform? Others? TikTok, okay, Facebook, Instagram. And here's another question. Does anyone happen to consider themselves an influencer today? I would say an influencer is someone with a couple thousand followers on a particular platform, or that you have a really niche following. Does anyone consider themselves an influencer? Okay, I see a yes there. Okay, cool. Payal, I'll have to check that out on YouTube. Thank you. So YouTube seems to be really popular. And it's interesting that YouTube is considered a social media platform. Some would say it's a social media platform. Some might call it something else. More of a kind of, it's essentially a marketing channel today. Any others? Okay, we'll keep filling those in, and I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So I'm just going to take a quick moment to share my screen. And let me just quickly put this into the presenter view. And Brooke, feel free to let me know if there's any questions that come in on the chat or anything like that. Feel free to let me know. So just to let you know, I'm probably going to talk for just about 30 minutes or so. I will have a couple of questions that I'll ask you to put into chat. And then after that, we will plan to open it up to a full Q&A at the end of the session. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, I was asking, what was your favorite social media platform? And today, as I mentioned at the top, we are going to talk about influencer marketing. And it's really interesting. So for many of you, as you're looking at different degree programs, I think the marketing function is always a really important discipline to look at as you're examining different degree programs, because marketing is one of those subjects that has to be essentially updated every single year. It is one of the fastest changing disciplines in business today. And if you're looking at programs and the faculty are teaching the same syllabus that they taught 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you can only imagine how much has changed in just the last 5 years. And so look at some of your favorite social media channels. Sure, YouTube was here 10 years ago, but TikTok, Instagram, I mean, we're talking just within the last 5 years, and they have a tremendous amount of influence. The other major change that's happening in marketing is that we're having a generational shift in our consumer power. So Generation Z, which is primarily the population that was born after 2002, 2003. So I actually have 2 Gen Z kids. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, 2 boys, who are very much on social media and TikTok. They're very different consumer behavior than, say, many of you who might be considered millennials. And then, of course, we've got Gen X, and then we've got your parents, maybe even your grandparents, who are considered baby boomers. And when we look at each of the patterns of consumer behavior for each of the generations, it's really fascinating to look at what different generations care about and the way that they get their information and the way that brands are able to best reach those target markets within those generational cohorts. So influencer marketing really did become more of a mainstream marketing channel within the past, I would say 8 to 10 years, but really it's strongly within the past 5 to 6 years, really with millennials leading the charge on this, but certainly this is pretty big as it relates to the Gen Z consumer cohort as well. So how do we actually define what influencer marketing is? So influencer marketing is a hybrid of old and new marketing tools, and it takes the idea of the celebrity endorsement and places it into the modern content-driven marketing campaign. So the main differentiator in the case of influencer marketing is that the results of the campaign are collaborations between brands and influencers. But influencers don't just involve celebrities. So we have, over the past really 40 years, seen this migration from who do we see on the front of magazines and who do we see promoting products, from being models and the kind of aspirational figure for a particular product, to celebrities, which in the 90s, it really became in early 2000s, celebrities that were leading the charge on promoting a lot of different types of brands, whether you're in health and beauty or cosmetics or automobiles or anything like that. Celebrities really did take the lead in the 90s and early 2000s, but today it's everyday people who are generating this influence to really be able to connect with audiences about a particular niche or an industry, a specific part of the industry that they're really interested in. And when we think about what defines an influencer, it's someone who has the power to affect purchase decisions of others because of their authority or their position or their relationship that they have with the audience. And so we'll talk about what really, how do you actually create the ability to be an influencer? It really comes down to a couple of key ingredients. The first being authenticity. And that is a big word. If you take marketing with me at Halt, you'll probably hear the word authentic or authenticity almost in every single class, because it really is one of the core elements of marketing today. Is how do you actually communicate in an authentic way? How do you represent your company and your brand in an authentic way? How do you represent the values of your target market as well as your company in an authentic way? But the question is, for influencers, how do they become authentic? Like, how can that be realized through social media, through marketing channels? And it really comes down to understanding your story as the influencer and what makes you unique. So what we see is, we'll see influencers trying to act like someone else or trying to appeal to an audience by pretending they might have a lot of knowledge in a specific area. But at the end of the day, it's really the hard work as an influencer that you put into authentically cultivating your following, because you've studied an industry, because you've studied a topic, because you love and have a passion for fashion or for cosmetics or for gardening or for making candles, as we'll see in one of our examples coming up. And so the truth is, you can't try to copy other influencers if you want to be an influencer, because what you'll lose is the authenticity piece. You really have to think about what makes me unique and how can I take my story and really be able to utilize elements of that to connect with my audience. So let's look at one particular social media platform specifically. And a few of you said that this was one of your favorite platforms. I have to say, over the pandemic, this one definitely grew on me, primarily because my son has like 150,000 followers on TikTok. And so clearly, as his mom, I was on the platform, making sure everything was on the up and up of the content he was posting. He's a musician. But it really became a fascinating platform to just be part of and to check out and to see it evolve over the past 2 years. So as of, within the past year, it's nearly accumulated 700 million users. It has 2 billion downloads. In 2020, 62% of TikTok users were between the ages of 10 to 29. And for those of you who are young enough to remember, perhaps, TikTok used to be Musical.ly, and it primarily really started as a social media platform for middle schoolers and has since evolved. As we know, in Gary Vaynerchuk, if you ever follow Gary V, he will always say technology ages up. We see that with social media ages up. So oftentimes, if you want to know what's the hot new social media platform, check out what the middle schoolers are looking at, because that can probably tell you what the millennials and the Gen Xers and the baby boomers will be on in 2 to 3 years. TikTok users spend about an hour a day on average, and 9 out of 10 TikTok users use the app daily. So when you just think about the amount of attention that the platform gets on a daily basis, the amount of time people spend, it's just incredible real estate. And so if you're able to cultivate a real following on TikTok, it's really impressive. And that more than 1 billion videos are viewed every single day on TikTok. So really a spectacular platform. So why is TikTok so successful? What made it so successful? Well, one might say that it definitely was the global pandemic that helped. I think a lot of people were bored at home, and it was one of those platforms that I think allowed you to easily post content around what was happening at the time. And that's what we find if we look at the history of social media platforms and how they have evolved. It has usually been some events that really did spur the usage of the particular platform because of how it worked. So if we look back as to how did Twitter become super popular, a lot of people look at the history of Twitter and say that, Oprah Winfrey, over, I think it was about 10 years ago, posted on Twitter, she tweeted something, and everyone kind of points to that moment as that was Twitter's rise to popularity. But actually, if you look a little bit before that, it was actually a huge earthquake that had happened in San Francisco, that the platform started to be leveraged as a communication channel for people to be able to tell other people in very quickly in very short text where they were, what was happening, like up to the date, happenings on the ground during the earthquake, when a lot of different types of communication channels, mobile technology and so forth was down, and they were able to kind of get messages out. And that, because of the way TikTok is built, because of the format of the channel, that was an event that happened that really did allow people to understand how to use it. And it garnered a lot of popularity around that time. And then, of course, Oprah tweeting after that really did, kind of put it into the stratosphere. So similar to TikTok, I think the pandemic definitely did, help it rise. But if we also look at, for instance, the format of the platform, it's also about the fact that it leverages short form video content. And it's one of the platforms that did this really well first. I know now we have, of course, there's always been YouTube that's used video content, but that has been actually longer video content. But it really is the recipe of 60 seconds to upwards of 2 minutes that is truly what makes this short form video content such an incredible way to be able to communicate, whether you're telling a story or sharing a message, or even just, doing something funny or sharing music, whatever it is that you want to share. It allows people in a very short period of time to understand what it is that you have to offer and what value you bring to the market. So short form video content is where I want to focus right now, because with the rise of platforms like TikTok, like Reels, like Vine, it really is about, this video content getting shorter and lending itself to that 60-second format. I know that upwards of 2 minutes is now allowed on TikTok, but it's really about the perception that short form video content on platforms like, YouTube, that's seen as being more around 10 minutes. Where that's a sweet spot for YouTube. For TikTok, it's more about the very short form, 60 seconds, under 2 minutes. that allow people to really, see something quick and be able to move on. The other major piece is that it's user-generated content. So you might have heard that term, UGC, user-generated content, which is about, how consumers are able to tell their story and influence purchasing decisions for more brands, and to develop influence by not using up too many resources, but by really being able to share their opinion or their thoughts on a particular product, a brand, or an industry. So when we look at, what makes short form video content successful, we find that consumers really do seek out authenticity and transparency in the brands that they are following. And so with short form video content, you only have a few seconds to connect with your audience. So how do you do that? There's no real exact science, but being authentic is what's most important, is that people can feel a connection right away because they feel like you're being real and you establish trust with the consumer. 70% of consumers said that they felt connected to brands whose CEO was on social media platforms. So for a lot of companies, and we find this with a lot of startups, where the face of the brand really is the founder of the company or the CEO. And when they're able to tell their story and authentically connect with followers through social media, upwards of 70% of today's consumers really do like that. They want to get to know the brand or the face and the story behind the brand. And then, of course, in 2021, we've seen brands that are focusing also on things like educational content through their short form videos. So, how-tos, do-it-yourselves, explainer videos, again, to be able to share the story of the brand and the products and to offer a level of transparency behind how the brand came to be. So what I'm going to do now is I want to just share 2 short videos. I'm hopeful this will work. I'm not going to spend too much time on it if it doesn't work, but I'm going to, hopefully it should work. So I'm just going to show a part of these 2 videos. This first one is an example of storytelling as it relates to a brand. This is a Soyo candles. It's a very up and coming brand, and the founder does a really fantastic job of creating this short form video content to connect with her customers. So let's just watch a sample.
Hi guys, how are you? This is Rosemary from Soyo Candles, and I am here to share with you my brand's journey. Over on Instagram, I have honestly an amazing group of women following me and guys as well, and we're building this like small community of amazing people, and you guys are always asking me questions and always asking for tips on how to build your own small brand, and as well as just want to know a little bit about me and my journey and how did I got here and why I even decided to start making candles. A lot of people find that random. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to know a little bit more about me, my brand, and our journey, just keep watching.
Okay, so that's one example of Soyo Candles, who's really, again, in a very authentic way, very down to earth, not scripted, being able to share the honest journey of how she started and created a brand. Again, bringing even more value to her customers beyond selling them candles, but to really help them even think about starting their own business. So this next video is the same brand, Soyo Candles, but it's a different type of content that she shares in this video. So let's just watch just a piece of this.
Hi guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So excited to have you back for another video. And today's video is actually our most requested video of all times. I'm always getting this question to please make a step-by-step candle making tutorial. So that is exactly what I'm going to bring you today. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how I make our luxury handmade candles. I'm going to give you some tips, some tricks that I personally use, and I'm also going to give you a list of materials that you need if you're interested in creating your own candle or if you're interested in creating your own candle company.
Okay, so those were 2 examples of, again, short form video content but two different purposes, bringing different value to the customer. And again, I think what's so interesting about that second video is if you were to talk to older entrepreneurs, so I'm talking Gen X and baby boomers, and you were to ask them back, 20, 25 years ago, what do you think about, telling someone that you have an idea or telling someone the secret around how do you make your product? Most people would say, no, you have to keep it a big secret because that's your intellectual property. And it's your intellectual property. But what we find today is everything needs to be much more transparent. And the more transparent you are with your brand through these social media channels, where you're willing to say, hey, this is how you make these cool candles, and I want to share this value with you, you build more trust with your following, and they will actually become more brand loyal as a result, rather than saying, no, I'll just do it myself. You might have one or two people that do that, but for the most part, they're going to appreciate the fact that you're giving them additional value above and beyond the product, and that you're actually building tremendous trust with them as well. So it is a different way of thinking about business, which is, again, I tell my entrepreneurship students, have you told anyone about your idea? And if they say, no, I don't want anyone to steal my idea, I usually say to them, well, first of all, you've been thinking about it a lot longer than other people have. So it's unlikely they could steal your idea. Second of all, you need to find out if it's a good idea. And if you don't talk about it and tell people, then it's hard to really know whether or not it'll fit into the marketplace someday. So talk about your ideas, bring value, be transparent, be authentic. And that's a great way to create influence. So just as a quick summary on that, how do you become an influencer? You want to, first of all, think about what is your passion and select your niche. Your niche being that specific area that you're really focused on bringing value to a customer, to a market. You want to optimize your social media profiles. So you want to make sure that you're out there, but you want to also understand that different platforms have different purposes. And you probably have completely different audiences on each platform. You'll have baby boomers and Gen X on Facebook. You'll have millennials on Instagram, and you'll have Gen Z on TikTok and Snapchat. So understanding who's the audience on each platform and how do you deliver content on that platform? Because again, short form video content is fantastic on TikTok. It's actually getting really good on Instagram through Reels. But with Facebook, it might be something else. Facebook is really becoming more of a marketplace more than anything else. So you just really want to think about the purpose of each of the channels. Then you want to understand your audience and really think about what's going to connect with them. You want to create and post the most relevant content, and you want to keep that content active. So be consistent and regular in how you post. And you want to think about, how am I bringing value and engaging with my audience? Getting likes leads to nowhere. You want to have engagement. Engagement are things like shares, comments, being able to have these conversations with brands. So letting brands know that you're open for collaborations, even perhaps being able to invite some of your followers to create their own user-generated content that you can collaborate on and share, would be really, a wonderful way to cultivate your influence and cultivate that following as well. So I just want to shift gears for a quick moment as we start to bring this to a close in the final 10 minutes or so, which is to think about and talk about something called brand activism. So when we look at the future of marketing, because that's where we need to be focused, because it changes on a daily basis, it changes so fast. Brand activism is something that's really become a very hot topic in the marketing discipline, and especially, I think, a really complex area for brands and for companies to navigate, especially over the last 4 to 5 years. However, if we look at what do consumers want from brands, 65% of individuals want companies and CEOs to take a stand on social issues. And if you look at younger generational cohorts of consumers who actually have more consumer power because they have influence over their parents and their grandparents, 78% of millennials and Gen Z want companies to take stands on social issues. So it's really, important. Consumers for a long time have demanded that companies and brands are aligned with their values. However, before social media, when there were just mass marketing channels like TV, print, radio, companies were allowed to be pretty private about how they did business behind the scenes. And really the only messaging that consumers knew about companies is what was thrown out into these mass marketing channels, what kind of communication the company essentially shared with their consumer target markets. But today, with social media and the internet, companies have to be transparent because it's going to come out no matter what. And so it's, we have moved as it relates to brand activism from a place called corporate social responsibility, which is otherwise known as CSR. You might have heard that term, where companies used to really do good deeds and efforts for their local geographic area, maybe where they had a plant or their corporate headquarters. They used to participate in community events, oftentimes linked to where, schools and churches and places that their employees lived, to kind of transitioning to more of a social marketing or cause-related marketing effort, where brands started to recognize this real opportunity to say, wow, we could actually say something to our consumer market on a bigger level, through bigger communication channels, whether it be nationally or internationally. And we can actually do good. We can raise lots of money. We can bring lots of good attention to a specific issue. We can care about something like the environment, like climate change and so forth, like education. And we can get, millions of people to care about this because we have this, massive way to be able to communicate, and also not just through our marketing channels, but also through our brand, to what we see today, which is basically brand activism, which by definition is actually political in nature. So what we're finding more and more, and a brand activism scholar by the name of Yashoda Bhagwat defines it as the firm's public demonstration, statements, and actions of support or opposition to one side of a partisan issue. So by definition, brand activism is actually political in nature. And so today, it's really hard, I think, for brands to be able to navigate this road of, once being completely apolitical, we're not going to say anything about anything because we want to appeal to everyone and we want to not offend anyone, to now being really forced by their consumers, by their target markets, by their loyal customer bases to say, well, how do you feel about Black Lives Matter? How do you feel about the #MeToo movement? What are you doing as it relates to your business on climate change? And consumers are demanding this more and more. And we see this coming up through social media, right? We see the conversations, and which is why we have the hashtag movements to really put pressure on brands. So there's a term that we like to use called brand fortitude. And the way that I would describe or define brand fortitude is really recognizing it as the ability of a brand to really stand firm in their values and to understand the ramifications when they do decide to come down on one side of a particular issue. And, the worst thing for brands to do is to really flip-flop on issues. We have seen that time and time again, for brands to really flip-flop, to say, yes, they're for something, no, they're against something, yes, they're for something. The other kind of real dangerous territory for brands is when they come out strong on an issue, but then if you just peel back one layer of the onion, you see that the brand doesn't actually operate this way. So we saw this a lot during this past summer or last summer, I should say, with the George Floyd protests that were happening in the United States and around the world, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw a lot of brands come out and say #BLM, we believe in the Black Lives Matter movement. But when people started to investigate, do they have people of color or women on their boards or in their executive leadership, they really lacked inclusivity, standards of inclusivity and diversity in how they actually did business. So a lot of brands were actually, seen as what we call woke washing, which was really trying to appeal to a certain type of an audience by saying these provocative things on social media, but not having the goods to back it up. So brand fortitude is about, being able to be strong in your values. Some companies that do this really well might be Patagonia. If you've ever heard of Patagonia, they make outdoor climbing equipment, outdoor gear, camping equipment. They have always been really strong on the environment. They have done lots to help protect the environment. They have recently made some pretty big statements as it relates to who's on their board, where their money goes, the types of organizations they support, because they don't even want vendors to work with vendors who are actually supporting movements that don't protect the environment and so forth. So you look at a brand like that they have fortitude because they stand strong in their values, and they can come out with, these social issues and be able to make a statement, and people authentically believe what it is that they have to say. So how to build brand fortitude is an important question for marketers today. And it's an important question for influencers to think about the brands they associate with, to make sure they have the fortitude that, if the brand comes out and says something or does something, do they have the goods to back it up? Can they actually support you? And are your values as an influencer connected and aligned with the brand as well? So again, the question that's, the kind of $1 million question is, can brands change society? And is it their responsibility to change society? And increasingly, we're finding that consumers believe that brands can make a difference and facilitate real change. So upwards of 66% of consumers believe that brands who speak out can facilitate real change and develop awareness and utilize their platforms, especially social media, to affect real positive change in society. And marketers also recognize their responsibility, and they're feeling this pressure as well. So as we see here from this quote from Edward Borelli, who's the vice president of marketing at Planet Fitness, he says that what stands out most to me is the fact that consumers are looking to brands to help change society. Brands have a tremendous amount of responsibility to not just themselves, but to the communities that they serve. And so when we look today at the marketing function overall, again, marketing used to be seen as this real creative discipline, one that's about good communication, one that's about advertising, and certainly connecting with the consumer. But what we see today, if you look at how to develop an effective marketing strategy, an effective brand strategy, an effective social media or digital marketing strategy, it's really about that authentic connection. But just like with influencers who, can't authentically connect with their following if they don't really know who they are and what makes them special, it's very similar for companies and brands. If companies and brands don't recognize and think about, okay, what are the values that we stand for as a company? And what is the infrastructure that we have at our company that allows us to operationalize and make these values possible so that we can continue to make business decisions based on these values, is also incredibly important to brands and to the marketing function. So marketing has become, I believe, one of the most important business functions today. Of course, I believe that. I'm a marketing professor. But I do believe that it really has this kind of additional weight because of the higher expectations that today's consumers really do have on brands to impact and make positive change. So where I want to really end, and where I would love to get your thoughts, is that can you name some brands that have taken a social issue, that have taken a stand on a social issue, and do you believe brands should become political? So we'd love to have you put your responses in the chat on these two questions. What are your responses? Do you have some can you think of some brands that have taken some steps on social issues? And do you believe brands should be political? Feel free to post your responses in the chat. Okay, so Payal, I think to an extent a company can be political, but not overboard. Okay, so and then we've got Rohit who says brands should not become political. And here's the thing, I think that, and it'd be great to hear from some additional folks who are on the line. What are your thoughts on this? These are the types of debates we have in class often. Yes, for social responsibility, but not for political. So yeah, these are a lot of the usual responses that we get from students. So what I would challenge for a lot of you is to think about, but in today's, when we think about social responsibility, when we think about CSR type efforts or other social issues, are they truly apolitical in nature, or are those even being polarized as well? So if we think about climate change, is that a political issue or not? I think in a lot of countries, it is a political issue right now. And so when companies and brands decide to support an issue like climate change, they do end up supporting politicians and other types of political movements that are linked to that issue. And, one way or the other, the brand really has to make a decision based on its values. And if it makes the decision based on its values and it's able to operationalize those values, then it builds the brand fortitude to be able to stand behind, that particular side of the issue that it decides to stand on. I'm not sure if it's political, but Airbnb offered housing to Afghan refugees. Yes, brands should be political. That's what young people want to see, brands that aren't afraid to speak up. Molly, excellent. Yes, Airbnb has done some really amazing things that if you look at their business model and their economic model, they really practice what we call total societal impact, where they make decisions that are in line with their business model that also help people. So whether it's when there's natural disasters and they want to give housing to first responders, whether it's giving housing to Afghan refugees, the Airbnb model is really built on bringing people to the platform. And so by bringing people to the platform, by offering this free housing, they're achieving both their business model and doing good for society. So these, it's a win-win if you think about it, what Airbnb is doing. And we're seeing more and more companies trying to think about their business practices, their business models, and trying to find that win-win. I just want to quickly wrap up here. Many tech companies have made policy changes to carbon neutral. Excellent. There's a lot of other companies that you wouldn't expect. Like for instance, Grupo Bimbo, if we have anyone who's from Mexico or Central or South America, you probably know Grupo Bimbo. And for those of you in North America, they actually own most of the bread aisle in North America with brands like Thomas English Muffins and Entenmann's and Sara Lee and all our favorite bread carbohydrate brands. They're actually carbon neutral in North America, which is pretty remarkable. They've made such an investment in wind technology. They're actually carbon neutral, but most people don't realize that. And Abraham, yes, Ben & Jerry's is classic brand that has always stood on the side of brand activism and really has created an identity, a brand identity that's centered around their level of activism, even though they've since been purchased by Unilever. And so they have been able to maintain that kind of Vermont down-home activism, even though they're owned by a multi-billion-dollar company. So excellent. Thank you so much for your engagement. I want to open it up for questions now as we wrap this up. So please feel free to put in the Q&A, and I think Brooke is going to let me know what questions there are.
Yes, I will. Yes, go right ahead. Please feel free to enter your questions into the chat function. I'll go ahead and read those off. Great comments, by the way, everyone. That was really cool to see what everyone had to say. All right, let's see. What career options are available with marketing at Halt?
Excellent question. So if you're thinking about what kind of careers can you get if you pursue a master's in international marketing degree, or decide to concentrate in marketing, whether you're getting your international business degree or your MBA. there's lots of different jobs you can get through marketing. I will say one thing that's important to think about as it relates to Halt is, again, we take a very forward-looking approach with marketing. So we do realize that marketing is not just the creative side anymore, that it's actually steep in business analytics and marketing analytics, and understanding the data now drives a lot of marketing decisions. And so the skills that you learn, which are very hands-on, and again, a lot of our classes are incredibly experiential. So you will learn a skill and then you'll actually be applying it. Most of my classes, I actually bring in clients. Like, so for instance, my MBA marketers are going to be working with General Mills this fall. And that allows the students to actually learn something in class and then to apply it to a real company based on a challenge that they're facing, and to really test out their own skills. So it's a wonderful way to, be able to understand in real time how this would apply at a real company in the marketplace. So I would say marketing analyst, sales jobs, marketing coordinators, project coordinators, lots of different titles you would be able to achieve coming out with a marketing degree.
Great, thank you. Molly would like to know, for entrepreneurs, what would you say are some tips to being authentic? It's a good question.
That's a great question. So I always start out my entrepreneurship classes with saying, know thyself. So being authentic is about knowing you. And, a lot of the most successful CEOs don't just have IQ, they have EQ. So if you've ever read Daniel Goleman's work around emotional intelligence, understanding that it really begins with a level of self-awareness, not just for who you are and what your capabilities are and what your skills are, but also, what triggers you, how do you interact and collaborate with other people, how do you work in teams? And then, of course, from your skill set perspective, it's important to understand what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses or your challenging areas, because the first thing you want to think about as an entrepreneur is finding a good team, finding people that will help complement your skill sets. And so to really know thyself, to have that level of self-awareness will undoubtedly allow you to become authentic in the way that you create your company. And then it's also thinking about your own values. So again, I tell entrepreneurs all the time, don't wait until you have investors, because you're going to end up adopting their values once you take their money. But if you start out very strongly in your own values, establishing how you want to do business, what are the values that you care about? Do you want to have a socially driven mission related to your business? That will allow you to think about the type of company you want to set up, the type of business model you want to have, the type of vendors you want to work with, and eventually the type of investors you want to attract to your business. So knowing your values and how you want to run your business will allow you to stay authentic through that process.
Great, thank you. Any book recommendations related to marketing?
Oh, yes, lots. So my colleague, Matt Johnson, who's a marketing professor at Halt in Boston, he just came out with a book called Blindsight, which is super interesting around about the world of neuromarketing. So looking at the intersection between neuroscience and marketing, super interesting. He and I are actually coming out with a book on branding in 2022, which we're publishing through The Economist. So we're excited about that. Alexander Chernev's work out of Northwestern is really good as well. That's really around the marketing fundamentals and things like that. And then, of course, if you are interested in more of an entrepreneurial marketing approach, Eric Ries's books, Lean Startup, are great frameworks to look at entrepreneurial marketing.
Awesome, thank you. We have quite a few questions here, so we'll probably go through maybe 4 or 5 more. Is that okay?
Yeah.
What do you think the next big social media platform will be?
It's hard to say. It depends on what the young people are on. Here's the thing. I think Snapchat's interesting. The young people are on it nonstop because it's the way they can hide text from their parents. That's really the primary function. As having 2 teenage boys, I know that's the function of Snapchat. They want to hide their disappearing text from me. I wonder if the platform will again age up in some way and evolve. I think the way they uses filters and other things is really interesting. Clubhouse is a new one that's come on, but I don't know if it's gaining the traction that people expect it to. I feel like it's got to evolve somehow. So, I think Clubhouse is super interesting. It's almost like a radio format. I think if it turns to more video and podcasting, I think that could be really interesting for Clubhouse, but I'm not seeing the traction quite yet. So it's hard to say. I thought Twitter had a rebound about a year ago, but I don't know, since some people got kicked off Twitter, it seems like they unfortunately went down. I was happy to see some people get kicked off Twitter, but it's gone downhill a bit. It doesn't have the same level of engagement. So those are maybe some of my predictions, but I don't know, it's hard to say.
Great, thank you. All right, for any business founder, is it better to undertake personal branding or company name branding when building?
That's really interesting. So I think so. Here's two things. First of all, as a student, as a professional, no matter who you are, you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not. The question is, have you done anything to cultivate that personal brand? So you have a personal brand. It's whether or not you put effort into making that more meaningful for people so that you start targeting the people you want with your personal brand, and what they look for, what they see is what you want them to see. So if you haven't Googled yourself yet, Google yourself and find out what people are seeing when they Google your name, because 82% of employers who are going to interview you or recruiters will Google your name before you walk into the interview. So I think cultivating a personal brand is a must. And I do lots of personal branding workshops at Halt, a lot of times with students in the fall, to really say you have a year to build your personal brand before employers start Googling your name. So use that time wisely. I think oftentimes with startups, the founder ends up becoming the face of the brand. So if you have a strong personal brand, that can get transferred over. But I don't think you should not think about what is the brand of the company. And again, what you're going to find as the founder is hopefully your values come through in the way that you conduct business. And again, if the company shares your values and shares what you care about as a person, then there's probably going to be a lot of alignment between your personal brand and the brand of the company. But the brand of the company should also not just be you, the founder, but probably your founding team, and really caring about what their values are as well, and coming to some level of agreement on that, because they're the ones who will have to make business decisions that are driven by those values.
Great. All right, we'll probably do about 2 or so more. What do you think is the most valuable marketing skill to have right now? For example, video marketing, marketing analytics, influencer marketing, etc.
I think that's a great question. I think it depends a little bit what your skill set is. So I do think that the marketing function and discipline has become broader, and that we need a lot more analytical minds in the marketing function. Again, I think marketing has a tendency to attract creatives and people who are strategic thinkers, which is really important. But we need more people who are more analytical, because marketing decisions are driven by data. So if you're an analytical person, then I think, business analytics, marketing analytics is a fantastic skill and very important for you to think about. However, not everyone is analytical. I do think you need to think about how you're able to leverage data, use data for storytelling. So I would say the next most important skill is your storytelling ability. How do you develop content and storytelling, whether it's about yourself, your personal brand, about your company, about your product, about your customer? How can you storytell, and how can you leverage data for that storytelling? But I think storytelling, which is basically the evolution of content development, is probably one of the most important skills in marketing today.
Great. And the last question we'll end off on are any social media platforms, are all social media platforms, there we go, great for any and all types of businesses and across all industries?
So I will say no, and primarily because you should have a pretty specific target market when you're thinking about your brand and your products. Now, you might have multiple product portfolios that go after different target markets, but you really need to think about who is it that you're marketing to. And that has become much more specific because of the access to data that we have through social media channels, that we get very specific when we create a target persona. We create the name of the person, their age, their education, their marital status, their children, where they live, their, every detail you can imagine. Do they have pets? I mean, we get really specific in creating that persona. And then we think about how do we reach them? And that's where you think about, okay, so what's the right social media platform or channel that I should be on to reach that specific person? So I think it's important to be aware and exploring all platforms, but you, depending on your brand and your product, depending on who your target market is, you'll probably be honing in on one or two that are the best spend for your dollar in order to reach and communicate and engage with that particular audience.
Great, thank you so much. While we're wrapping up here, would you mind putting in the chat function the name of the book that you had mentioned? If you could put in all of them, or at least the authors, that would be great, but specifically the book on neuroscience and marketing would be amazing.
Yes, Blind Side by Matt Johnson and Prince. These are two, you can get this on Amazon, but these are two Hult professors actually of marketing. So, and I will say, Eric, Lean Startup. This is, if you want to do anything in entrepreneurship, this is a fundamental book to read. Everyone loves Eric Ries's Lean Startup. That's a great one.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for going through your whole presentation too. I think that was really informative for everyone. I know that I learned a lot just while listening in over here. So really appreciate that. And also for you taking the time to answer all the questions that we had. And thank you so much to all of our attendees for joining. I did put this in the chat function, but if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email either info.northam@hult.edu or admissions@hult.edu. And I'm happy to pass you along to your enrollment advisor, again, for any follow-up questions. But thank you so much again, everyone, for joining. And we hope to see you at future Hult events. You can go to hult.edu/events. Have a great
And
day,
just
everyone.
real quick, Brooke, I just want to say I put my email into the chat. So if anyone has any questions around marketing at Hult or the classes or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to speak with any students that are interested in talking more about this.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.